All right, so you ready to tackle this question? You know the one, it's like, do Americans think everything revolves around the U.S.?
Hmm. It is a pretty common stereotype, right?
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes stereotypes, they come from somewhere.
Yeah, there's often a kernel of truth hidden in there somewhere.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So today we're going to take a deep dive.
Yeah.
And we're going to use this video script as our source.
Okay, sounds good.
And we're going to try to find out what the real factors are that contribute to this whole idea that Americans
Well,
think the world revolves around them.
well, it's interesting you say that because one of the first things the script tackles is geography.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it might seem a little counterintuitive at first.
Yeah, how does geography play into this?
Well, think about the size of the U.S. I mean, it's vast and it's incredibly diverse.
Mm.
And the script actually points out that this actually plays a pretty significant role.
So, like, are we talking, like, different cultures within the U.S. or?
That's definitely part of it, but it's even more basic than that, just in terms of the sheer size. I mean, the U.S. spans 6 time zones.
That's huge.
It's massive. You've got everything from, like, towering mountain ranges to, like, vast deserts, bustling cities, quiet coastlines, all within one country.
Yeah, that's true. You could, like, spend your entire life just exploring different parts of the U.S.
Exactly. And for a lot of Americans, that's exactly what they do. They may not feel the need to travel internationally because they feel like they can experience so much variety without ever leaving.
I can see that, yeah. When you've got the Grand Canyon and, like, skiing in the Rockies and beaches all in one country,
Exactly.
it's kind of like, why go anywhere else?
And here's where it gets even more interesting. The script argues that this geographic diversity, combined with the way the U.S. is often like depicted on maps, especially in education,
Oh, interesting.
can subtly reinforce this idea of the U.S. as like the center of things.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, like, I remember those maps from school where, like, the U.S. just seemed to take up, like, the majority of this space.
Right, and that visual representation can be super powerful, especially when you're young and you're forming your worldview. It kind of subtly reinforces this idea that the U.S. is like the primary reference point, even if that's not the intention.
Yeah, wow. It's like looking at the world through, like, a U.S.-centric lens
Exactly.
from the very beginning.
Exactly.
So it's not just geography, though.
Right.
There's also the undeniable influence of, like, American media
Oh, yeah.
and pop culture on a global scale.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about Hollywood blockbusters, hit TV shows, music.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
American media has a truly global reach. There's no denying that.
I've always wondered about this, though.
Hmm.
Do you think this, like, constant exposure to American media,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of leads some Americans to just assume that everyone understands their cultural references? Like,
Yeah.
Everyone's seen the latest Marvel movie or, knows who Beyonce is.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and the script does touch on this. They argue that it can create this sort of bubble where those references feel universal,
Right.
even when they aren't. It's
Yeah.
easy to forget that not everyone grew up watching the same shows or listening to the same music.
Right. Yeah, it's like your own little world,
Exactly.
but it's not the whole world.
Right.
And then there's the economic side of things, which the script also talks about. The U.S. being a global economic powerhouse.
Absolutely. I mean, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency,
It's true.
and that economic dominance has huge implications.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, for everything.
For everything. International trade, global financial markets, everything operates within a system that's so heavily influenced by the U.S. economy.
Right. So it's almost like the U.S. sets the tempo for the global economic dance floor.
It's a simplification, of course,
Sure.
but it does highlight the point that, the U.S. wields significant influence on a global scale, whether they intend to or not.
It's interesting. Okay, so we've got geography, media, economics all playing a role here.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another interesting point that the source delves into, and that is American patriotism,
Okay, yeah.
which, let's face it, can be pretty intense.
It can be.
From the 4th of July celebrations to the Pledge of Allegiance in schools. I mean, national pride is, like, woven into the fabric of American culture.
It is, and the script raises a really interesting question here. How is this outward display of patriotism perceived by people from other cultures?
It's a good question.
Because what some see as a celebration of national identity, others might view as exceptionalism or even arrogance.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Exactly, and that potential for misinterpretation is what the script highlights as another contributing factor to this stereotype we're talking about.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got geography, media, economics, patriotism, all kind of feeding into this idea,
Hmm.
but we can't forget about the internet and its impact, especially in this digital age.
Oh, absolutely. The internet, while connecting people across borders, can also create these online echo chambers where specific perspectives are like amplified.
Right. And the source actually points out that the internet itself, especially social media,
Hmm.
is heavily influenced by American trends and users.
Right. Think about how many like viral trends or challenges originate in the US and then spread outward. That constant exposure to American-centric content online can really reinforce this perception that the US is the center of the digital
Right.
universe.
And it's not always intentional, but it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's just the way it
It's
is.
just kind of how it's evolved.
So it really is fascinating how all these different pieces fit together,
Yeah.
from geography and media to economics and even, like you said, patriotism.
Yeah, and the internet too.
It all sort of intertwines to shape how people, both inside and outside the U.S., view the country.
Exactly. And that's really the key takeaway here, isn't it? It's not just about whether individuals believe the world revolves around the US or not.
Right. It's about like what that perception actually leads to in the real world.
Exactly, because even if it is just a stereotype, the actions and the policies of the US have this massive global impact. There's no denying that.
Right. Like whether we like it or not, what happens in the U.S. affects everyone else.
Absolutely. And this brings us to like a really important point that the script raises, and that's the whole idea of responsibility.
Oh, okay.
If a nation has this much power, this much influence on the world stage, what responsibilities come along with that?
Hmm. It's like that old saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting because there are so many different perspectives on how the US should wield that power.
Right, because the source mentions how some people argue that the U.S. actually has a moral obligation to, like, promote democracy and human rights.
Right. To use their power for good, basically.
Yeah, and to make the world a better place.
And that viewpoint often comes from the belief that the US, being a global leader, has this duty to advocate for positive change and to step in when those values are threatened.
I can see that, but there's another side to that argument too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I remember the script also talking about how some people think the U.S. should just focus on its own problems first
Right.
and not get too involved in other countries' business.
Yeah, they basically say, look, we need to prioritize domestic issues, maintain a strong defense, and avoid what they see as unnecessary interventions in foreign conflicts.
Right, so it's like this constant balancing act
Mm-hmm.
between looking inward and outward,
Yeah.
between like promoting global interests and protecting national ones.
And it's interesting because both sides of that debate have really compelling points, which is why this discussion never really goes away.
That's true, and it's reflected in U.S. foreign policy throughout history,
Exactly.
Like sometimes they're more interventionist, sometimes more isolationist.
Right? Think about like World War II, a massive intervention on a global scale compared to the much more isolationist policies of like the early 20th century.
Right, and these debates continue to shape foreign policy even today.
Absolutely.
Just look at all the discussions around international trade or military intervention or even humanitarian aid.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of this struggle to figure out what the U.S.'s role in the world should be.
And here's something really crucial to remember. These discussions aren't just happening within the US. The whole world is watching and reacting.
Oh, for sure.
They're analyzing how American actions and policies impact their own interests and their own well-being.
It's like being under a microscope, isn't it? Every move the U.S. makes gets analyzed for its potential ripple effects.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that stereotype we started with.
Mm.
If there's a perception, whether it's justified or not, that the U.S. doesn't fully grasp or consider its global impact, that can lead to mistrust and tension on the world stage.
Yeah, it's almost like the U.S. is that friend who always forgets that they're the loudest one in the room.
I like that.
Like their actions have an outsized impact, whether they realize it or not.
That's a great analogy.
So maybe what we need is like more global awareness
I think
and
both of you.
understanding both in the U.S. and in other countries too.
Absolutely. We need to see things from multiple perspectives, not just our own.
Speaking of perspectives, we talked earlier about how American media dominance might actually reinforce that U.S.-centric worldview.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't there a flip side to that? Like, couldn't American media also be a tool for promoting cross-cultural understanding?
That's a great point. It's easy to focus on the negatives, but American media does have the potential to be a force for good.
Right.
I mean, think about movies, music, TV shows. They can introduce people to different cultures and different ways of life.
It's like a window into another world.
Exactly. And with streaming services these days making content from all over the world more accessible than ever, the potential for cultural exchange is huge.
It really is. So it's not just about American media being dominant. It's about recognizing that it can also play a positive role in bridging cultural divides
Right. It's all about balance.
and complexity.
Exactly. And recognizing both the challenges and the opportunities that come with the U.S.'s unique global position.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We started with this simple question about perceptions, and now we're talking about global responsibility and foreign policy and the power of media.
It's a lot to think about.
It is a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to shift gears a little bit and focus on the individual level. Like, what can we as individuals actually do to become more globally aware?
Right, because knowledge is one thing, but action is another.
Exactly. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, so we're back and ready to shift gears a little bit.
Yeah, let's bring it all home.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've been talking about, these big picture ideas about, perceptions of the U.S. and its impact on the world.
Right.
But now I want to know, what can we as individuals?
Actually do to become more globally aware?
It's a great question.
Like, how do we take all this knowledge and actually put it into action?
Well, the source you provided actually offers some really good starting points.
Okay, awesome. Lay it on me. What's step one in Global Citizenship 101?
I think the first step is really simple, but it's crucial, and that is to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, for starters, we need to break out of our echo chambers, both online and offline.
Right, because it's so easy to get stuck in those little bubbles where everybody just agrees with you all the time.
Absolutely, and it's human nature. We tend to gravitate towards information that confirms our existing beliefs.
Right, it's comfortable.
It is. But if we really want to become globally aware, we have to challenge ourselves.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, you can start by reading articles from international publications or watch documentaries from different cultures. Seek out viewpoints that challenge your own assumptions.
So it's like expanding your mental map of the world, right?
Yeah.
It's exact. Seeing things from multiple perspectives instead of just your own little bubble.
Precisely. And another really powerful way to expand that mental map is through travel.
Oh, yeah, I love to travel.
It can be transformative. Experiencing other cultures firsthand can really open your eyes in ways that you just wouldn't expect.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's nothing quite like immersing yourself in a different environment.
Right.
Interacting with people who have different customs and ways of life.
Yeah, you challenge your assumptions, you broaden your horizons, and you really start to connect with humanity on a deeper level.
I feel like travel makes you realize that people are people no matter where you go.
Exactly.
But travel isn't always possible for everyone. So are there ways to cultivate global awareness without hopping on a plane?
Definitely. Think local. Explore different ethnic enclaves in your own city or visit museums and cultural centers.
Oh, yeah.
Attend international film festivals. Try cooking dishes from different cuisines.
It's like a mini world tour right in your own backyard. Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of language learning.
Oh, yeah.
Even basic proficiency in another language can really open up a whole new world of communication and understanding.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but I'm so bad at it.
Well, it's never too late to start.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about seeking out different perspectives. We've talked about travel and even local exploration. What about technology? Does technology play a role in all of this?
Absolutely. Technology can be a really powerful tool for connecting with people from all over the world. Join online forums, connect with people from other countries through social media, participate in virtual exchange programs.
So instead of just passively consuming information online, we should be using the internet to actively connect with people from all over the world.
Exactly, and build those relationships and really understand different perspectives.
Okay, so that's learning and connecting. What about action? How do we actually make a difference?
Well, remember, global citizenship isn't just about acquiring knowledge, it's about taking action. So support organizations that promote international development or volunteer your time to help refugees or immigrants in your community.
Oh, okay.
Advocate for policies that address global issues like climate change or poverty.
So it's about taking all that we've learned and actually putting it into practice.
Exactly. Global citizenship is an ongoing journey. It's about learning, connecting, and taking action to make the world a more just and equitable place for everyone.
Wow, I feel like this whole deep dive has really been eye-opening.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
We started with this stereotype about Americans, and we ended up with a roadmap for becoming more globally engaged citizens.
And it's something we can all strive for regardless of our nationality or background.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to take that first step. Seek out those diverse perspectives, connect with people from other cultures, and find ways to make a positive impact on the world.
Because in the end, it's not about whether the world revolves around any one country.
Right.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and working together to create a better future for everyone.
That's a great way to put it.
Eh.
Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking deep dive, everyone. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep engaging with the world around you.